Alright, yo, how's it going, guys? Today we're going to be doing an updated matchup tier list for top lane because a lot of people have been asking me to do a new one, so yeah, I'm going to be doing it. The patch I'm currently on, as the recording is I'm pretty sure it's 14.12, yeah, we're going to give our thoughts on it. So yeah, let's get right into it. First, I'm going to go through the hardest matchups, so right now, I actually have a decent amount in the hardest tier. Like, I'm doing this based off of my experience right now. I'm not really doing it. I used to do them more based off, like, just in general, but I'm gonna do it more off of my personal experiences right now. So, we got Skarner, Fiora, Jax, Vayne, Quinn, Kennen, and Camille. Skarner, very self-explanatory. The champ's is like the best champ in the game still. He is getting nerfed pretty hard next patch, thankfully, so I'm hoping it's gonna help the matchup a bit. Like, it's gonna make the matchup feel a little bit easier. Like, maybe it'll be in the hard tier next patch. But as of right now, he just does way too much percent max self damage and just doesn't take damage as well. So the matchup's just kind of fucked up, and you can never really do anything about it. So yeah, that's why Skarner's there. Obviously, the standard Jax Fiora, it's like it's always been. Fiora has her parry and then also just does a lot of percent max self true damage and has a lot of sustain with their builds. And Jax has his E, obviously, to negate all of your damage, his dodge. But yeah, both of those matchups are still definitely up there for sure. Then I have champs like Vayne, Quinn, Kennen. Vayne is just very oppressive right now because with Fleet Footwork, she's able to just space really easily and also sustain pretty well. And she's always had really good base damage, so Vayne tops is very strong right now. I feel like in low reloads, maybe you can get away with playing against stuff like Vayne and Quinn a little bit more just because the players just aren't as good on the picks, right? So they'll make more mistakes. But in general, these matchups are very hard to play into if they have like any like knowledge on how to play the matchups. Honestly, I should probably put TF up here too. He did get nerfed a little bit, but TF is very similar to Vayne in playstyle, so I'll actually put him up in the hardest tier as well. Because I'm talking more for like GM Chalilo right now, so yeah, we got those two. And then Kennen just peels himself super easily and has a ton of poke damage. And yeah, it's just like pretty much impossible to kill a Kennen once he starts getting levels if he just spaces correctly. So it's very hard to get on him. And then Camille is just also very oversatted right now. I was actually tempted to still put her under in the hard instead of hardest, but with how strongly or like how well she scales right now, just because of how many times they buffed her, I'm honestly started to like shift her into the hardest because when you do play against a very good Camille player, it can be very oppressive. And even if you do get a small lead on Camille early, it's not going to matter if you don't have like a pretty huge advantage. And she'll just start to like just one tap you once she gets her Triforce. And then obviously, the more damage she gets to, the more problematic it becomes. So that's why all those matchups are in the hardest tier because it's pretty much counting on them to mess up. Because if they don't mess up and they just play, even if they don't play perfect, if they just play correctly to like a certain degree, it's almost impossible for them to like actually get put in a position where you're just going to be able to completely steamroll them. Because even if you solo kill most of these champions, they'll still have threat of killing you. So that's why I have them in the hardest tier. Now moving on to hard, I have a lot of like different variations of champions. Like you obviously have the burst champs like Rumble, Riven, Irelia, stuff like that. That's gonna be able to just like burn you down if you make one misstep. And then there's also some tanks like Poppy that, I mean, Poppy's just always been a good laner just because obviously she has her W to negate you from going in and there's a ton of max self damage on her Q. And then stuff like Udyr is kind of the same as Poppy, except obviously he doesn't have like a dash stop, but he does have a lot of percent max self damage and sustain. Jace in the past, I would have actually put Jace up in hardest, but he did get nerfed a little bit a couple patches ago, and he's not as popular anymore. So at least in top lane, I think mid lane he gets picked a decent amount, but top lane he's kind of just there. But he also does a lot of percent max self damage, so you do have to be careful about that. GP right now is kind of like, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't put him in hard for now. I know next patch is getting buffed pretty hard, so I'm still gonna keep him in hard because like if you when I'm playing against like really good GP players, it's very hard to like ever really do anything against them because they'll just play very passive early, and then once they start getting some levels, they just start to just burn you. So that's why I usually keep him there. Heimer is just super obnoxious, and pretty much if Heimer just plays around his turrets correctly, you should never be able to get onto him. And even if you do, he just stuns you and just walks out, and you just get dismounted and you're screwed. So it's very hard to play. Revan, Garen, Darius are all pretty much the same in the fact that they have really good base damage, and then their ults all execute, so it's very hard to remount against these champions. Like obviously the Darius 5-hit passive, Garen just percent mixing health damage, and then same with Riven. So they all just do really, really well, and they have good early like levels as well, especially Darius and Riven, so you have to play very slow against them. Garen is a little bit more punishable like pre-6, but post-6, obviously, I think he might honestly be the hardest out of the three, because even if you are taking short trades against Garen, as soon as he dismounts you, you're pretty much just screwed, unlike a Darius where he has to like build up his passive stacks. So it's a little bit harder to deal with that, but they're all very strong right now. Irelia, I haven't really seen much this season, but she's obviously a Bork user still, so she's still going to be very oppressive into you. And also her early levels, once she gets like level 2, 3, 4, if she ever gets her passive stacks up, you can never walk up to her. Action has really good burst. Azir top isn't really that popular anymore. He was very popular a couple patches ago when I first made a tier list, so I still kept him on here, because whenever he is picked top, it's very hard to play into, but he's not as popular anymore. Tryndamere has gotten a lot of like buffs over the last little while, so he is very impressive still. Urgot's very good. Rengar top's another champ that hasn't been picked as much lately for me, but he is still a very impressive top laner as well. And then Gwen, very good DPS, does true damage. It obviously has her immune thing on her W where it's hard to like actually land poke on her if she's just playing correctly. So that's why they're all there. They also have way like easier win cons to play around than you do, because you have to play their matchups very, very slow. But at least with these matchups, if you do build a pretty decent lead, it's usually not the end. Like, it's not like you're gonna get completely steamroll over them, but it is still very tricky. So that's why I put those guys in hard. Now to 50-50, there is a lot of champions here in 50-50, so I'm not going to go over every single one. I'll just like try to give like a consensus. Like, obviously, just looking at the thing that says 50-50, like obviously it kind of means that whoever knows the matchup more is gonna pretty much prevail in a lot of these scenarios. And if you're just playing correctly, you usually can get leads on these champs. It may not mean that you're gonna completely snowball and take over the whole game, but if you do build a large enough advantage, you should be able to at least pressure enough to where you're going to be drawing like some enemy champions have to like pull over to you, and you can make a lot of pressure. Like against a champ like Cassante, for example, if he gets a lead on you, you're never going to be able to play the game. But right now with the Ravenous build I've been running into like champs like Cassante or just tanks in general, if you can build up a small advantage early and you can slowly start to leverage that, you can actually get to a position to where you're kind of just stat checking them and they won't be able to actually just kill you, and you can just kind of just ignore them and just get free plates and turrets. So that's why a lot of these tank matchups are here. Stuff like Aatrox, you just have to be very careful, obviously, like spacing around his Qs, but I do think the matchup is definitely winnable as long as you're playing correctly and spacing well. Only issue is you can't play too passive against an Aatrox, because once he gets to level 6, if he is even with you and he can get a base off the tabbies or just some piece of armor, then it becomes pretty hard to kill him. But if you're able to pressure him early and get a big lead, it's usually not too bad. This the same kind of goes for Renekton, because I mean Renekton in general is kind of just Kled, but with a combat ult, right? So in theory, in the 1v1, he should always be stronger than you. But if you can play around his Fury bar and just like potentially bait out his spells as he's about to dismount you, then you can always just like run at him. But it does require him to mess up and for you to just find the right timing. So that's why I do think it can be winnable, but it also can be very hard. So that's why I put that stuff under 50-50. And that's kind of how you see with a lot of these matchups. It's just pretty much going down to, if you're playing patiently, or at least like in a position, putting yourself in a position to where you can succeed, you should be able to get leads on most of these champions. Like a champ like Warwick, for example, or Volibear, these are both very cheesy champions that want you to kind of just like bait yourself into going into them. But if you play smart and just play off of your poke with your Q and just slowly chunk them out, then eventually they're going to make a dumb mistake trying to overforce something, and you're just going to be able to capitalize on that and build off for big advantages off that. So as long as you're playing correctly and smart, these matchups shouldn't be too bad. But yeah, that's pretty much what I'm going to say for those, because as I mentioned, I don't really want to go through every single one, or else this video is going to literally be like a 30-minute video. So for the most part, it's just being smart and understanding the concepts of the matchups, which just comes from experience. Like the more experience you have in these matchups, you're going to understand how to punish them. So that's why I got them all in 50-50. Now in the favored, I got stuff like, I mean, I haven't played against the Fury since the buff yet in lane, but I'm assuming it still should be a pretty easy matchup, because the Fury has pretty low base damage early. So if he ever walks up to the wave, if you just land your EQ, you should just be able to one-shot, and just as soon as you get that first kill, and then the Fury, like, Nefiri shouldn't be able to play the game into you anymore. So I think it's a pretty free matchup. Akali, I was tempted to put it in 50-50, but I'll still put it in favor just because they did nerf her recently. And for the most part, you just got to be careful with the first few levels, like levels 1, 2 especially, because she can poke you with Q a decent amount in her passive. But if you play it patiently and just don't allow her to like harass you the first 2 levels, levels 3 to 5 especially, if you ever get an opportunity to land an EQ onto her, you should just be able to chunk her pretty easily. And yeah, just get an advantage off that because obviously your E and Q when you're mounted both have true sights, so you could see her in her shroud if you land your abilities. So you'll be able to just burst her out because she has pretty low base armor early, so it's not too bad. Sins, you just kind of have to ignore him. Like if you can try to deny him the proxy early, definitely try to, but like you don't want to like chase him over a proxy. Like if you don't have to, just make sure you're getting an advantage for yourself. And yeah, if he ever tries to force fight you in lane, you should be able to win as long as you're not just like panic throwing out abilities, so it's not too bad. Swain top isn't really that much of a thing anymore, but it still was like a pretty decent matchup for you just because he doesn't have, I mean, he does have decent poke at the first few levels, but if you do ever land your like EQ on him, like levels 3 to 5 especially, you'll always just win the trades early, and then yeah, you have healing reduction on your Q as well, so at 6, if you've already built yourself a low lead, it shouldn't be too bad. Kayle Vlad, if it's a really good Kayle player, I honestly think the matchup's kind of hard. But in general, most people that pick Kayle are kind of just either ADC mains that are autofilled, or it's just players that think they're good at the Kayle and don't actually know how to play it. So that's why I still usually put it in favored. But honestly, maybe I should have put it here. But I'll leave it here for now just because in general, like, unless the Kayle is really, really good at spacing, like you can just like, E onto her and just kind of just one-shot her early. I do think in the mid game she is actually very hard to deal with, so if you don't punish her early, it is hard. But it shouldn't be the end of the world. Same with Vlad. Like both of these champions, it's very dependent on you taking initiative early and just taking over. But if you do get the lead, like they can't really play the game against you. Just perma one-shot them. Rammus is the same thing as Singe, just ignore him if he's proxying, and if you can deny the proxy level 1, try to, right? Like don't let him do it. Because yeah, if he stays in lane, then he can't really lane against you, but you don't want to be too like worried about that stuff. But yeah, those are the favored ones. And then the free ones haven't changed. Like it's still just like Mundo, Silas top. But I mean, Silas top isn't really picked ever, but if he is there, then yeah. And then Smolder. I mean, I had this from the last tier list. I just left it in there, but I'm gonna be honest, I haven't seen Smolder top in forever, so I don't know if I'd really even consider it a top laner. But for the most part, like the freest matchup you'll ever have top lane, like that standard is usually always just gonna be Mundo, because as long as you're not getting poked out by his Qs and you're just playing around the wave, if he ever walks up, you just one-shot him early game and you can't play the game. So, or not one-shot, but you like burst him out and he can't do anything to you in return. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for me for this tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And yeah, I should hopefully have a full gameplay out tomorrow. Sorry for the last couple days not having them out. I was just busy with some stuff, but yeah, we should have a full gameplay out tomorrow. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, guys.